Scams like these don't work as well in person. That's why most of them are done online.
All right. Hi. Welcome to another edition of Cambridge Inside Out, the sequel. My name is Robert Winters, and today is, what is today's date?
I have no idea.
It's the year of our Lord,
You're not
2013.
watching it today anyway, right?
That's
If you
it.
are watching today, you should call us because we really want these phones to ring. Because today we will answer them.
We will actually answer the phone.
So call us.
All right, but today is, I believe, November 19th, 2013. And we do have a few things. So again, I'm Robert Winters, and you are?
Susanna Sagat.
All right.
Oh, can I just say one quick thing?
Please do.
You know, this is a very bootstrap operation, but we have, so it's just Robert and me really. There's no cue cards, there are no fancy staff out there. However, we have two great interns who've been with us the whole time, Isaiah and Dave. They're here and they really put us on the air. So we really appreciate their work. So I just wanted to let you know that.
Everything I understand about politics I learned from these gentlemen. They're laughing now.
All right. Okay, that's the end of this show.
Good night.
So I want to just talk about one quick thing about
All right.
elections.
Please do.
Okay, so we had election night, and they counted the ballots. And when they came out with the results, they were called preliminary results.
That's right.
Okay? All right. So we decided we're going to wait. So now Friday, there was a meeting.
Preliminary results.
Yeah, no one can see that.
I know.
Okay, we got in trouble over that last time.
I know.
So last Friday, there was a meeting to talk about the absentee ballots from overseas and then weird little ballots that no one else could figure out what to do with.
Provisional ballots.
Provisional ballots.
Yes.
Okay, so then they counted all the ballots that were possibly out there in the world to count, and that became a final
That's right.
count.
Yes.
But it doesn't mean it's the count.
Well,
It's final, but it's not official.
as Yogi Berra once said, it ain't over till it's over.
So,
Let
what happened Friday?
me first explain the nomenclature here.
Yeah, because
Prior to the federal government giving this,
blaming the government.
I blame Obama. No, no back in the early days before, I think it was Help America Vote Act, they basically wanted to make a provision so that military who are serving overseas, that if they sent in a ballot, that it would make sure it would be counted even if it arrived a little late.
Which we like.
So they allowed a 10-day grace period after Election Day, and then elections are supposed to wait until that's over, until anything becomes finalized. Usually it doesn't matter because there's a handful of ballots and very few elections are determined within really tiny margins. So we used to, back in the day, as we say, we used to refer to the unofficial results, which were election night. And then there were some auxiliary ballots with write-ins and what have you that were counted on Wednesday. So when those were included, we called that the official. So it was unofficial, official. And then along comes the federal government and says, we got this extra 10 days. So they changed the wording. So now, election night, it's the preliminary election results. The following day, when it's almost all done, it's the unofficial results. And then 10 days after Election Day, when they get in these handful of extra ballots, we call it the official results. And I heard one of the election commissioners made reference to, well, this is not the final. So now is this the final official results?
It's final, but it's not official.
But yeah, I think I think after the election results are determined, any candidate who is aggrieved by the results has, they said in the law, a 3-day window during which they can file for a recount.
Can I just make one personal comment here?
Sure.
It seems to me that, the key is you win if you win by one vote. You win, you're happy, you win. Well, this is one time where those extra number ones really matter because those candidates that win for sure, that they're at the top of the list,
Right.
they can sit back and they can just watch this process go and they don't care if it's called preliminary, final, official, they're in.
Yeah.
It's the ones at the end who are struggling for those final votes. They are suffering.
And I will tell you, I have encountered many a voter in recent days who were saying things like, well, I'm going to give my one to one of the new people to try them out here. But they also were friends of Minka van Buzicum, who now is the one who's just a few votes
Right.
off the mark. And so now a lot of her supporters are going, oh, I can't
Yeah,
believe
they
I
played
tried
with their
at
vote.
this.
We
Oh,
warned you
no,
not to
no.
play with your votes, didn't we?
No, if you
Yep.
really feel loyalty to one candidate, you really should stick with that candidate and not mess around. But an election's an election. I mean, one would argue that as long as the people are represented under Cambridge's system through some sort of proportional representation, it doesn't matter to the voters necessarily who
Right.
the representatives have to be, as long as they are representative.
Right.
So it matters, of course, a lot to the candidates.
Yeah, yeah. So the point is, if you're one of those at the bottom winners,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, it's going to be
it's
hard.
painful. So there was a recall called for?
Yeah, so just so to be clear about the numbers, what
Yeah.
had happened was there was,
Oh, yeah, tell us what happened Friday.
okay,
I'm
so
sorry,
there
I got
was,
ahead of
there
myself.
was, I think there had been in the very preliminary results, there was a gap of about 15 between Nadeem Mazen and Minka. And then with the unofficial, back on November 6th, that narrowed to 6-vote margin. And then with the provisional ballots, which were really only 6, but as we talked about on last week's program, there's some of these oddities of the little element of chance that is associated with the so-called Cincinnati method that results in a certain amount of vote shifts that can actually exceed the number of additional ballots. And that happened. Actually, just as a couple of quick numbers.
Before you
Yeah.
get to the numbers, I see the word provision, the, what are those ballots called, those 6 ballots?
Well, there were actually, turns out, 7 ballots, additional ballots that were thrown into the hopper on, there were actually, I think it was 9 total, but some of them were
And what are those
not
called?
counted. Well, first they go through the overseas absentee ballots.
Right,
That
and
was-
that's just people who are absent from town, who, any kind of overseas in the United States, it's the same thing as international.
Right, as long as the overseas absentee ballots, I mean, if it came from Pittsburgh, it actually would have had to have been by election day, by election day. But as long as it arrived within 10 days and it was postmarked by election day, then for an overseas ballot, it would have to be counted by law. So it was kind of curious. They were actually, you remember, you were there. The election commissioners were having to look at the envelope and here's a postmark from Canada. Let's see, now what kind of date system do they use? And they were trying to figure out, is that postmark say it was early, or did somebody just like 3 days after election day hear the preliminary result and say, quick,
Gotta
I'm
mail
gonna-
it in
I'm going
right
to mail it
away."
in now, right? So they had to determine whether it was legitimately mailed before election day, and I believe they correctly determined those things. So there were actually 4 additional overseas absentee ballots, of which 1 had an overvote, so it didn't have any valid choices on it. So there were really just 3. And then after they completed those 3, they then moved on to the so-called provisional ballots. And as you recall, most of them were of the type where, there was a person, perhaps an elderly person, used to live in Ward 5, Precinct 1, and actually was registered in Ward 2, Precinct 1, but was now showed up at 4-2, and then found out they weren't really registered there. They were still registered there. But the poll workers said, okay, we don't want you to go through too much, so we'll let you vote here, and we'll call it a provisional ballot, and then the election commissions will deal with it.
So they took it and set it aside.
So it was set aside, and then they opened it up and they have a very good protocol because nobody in the public is allowed to see who it's from, right? You have to preserve the secrecy of the
Yeah.
ballot. So, for example, there was one ballot that was cast in Ward 4, Precinct 2, by a person who was registered in 2-1. So the ballot was then counted for Ward 2, Precinct 1.
And where it's important is, the ballots are ordered in that random precinct order, so you don't want to put that ballot under 4-2 where the person voted. You want to put it under 2-1 where the person was registered.
One could argue that with the little bit of randomness in this, it's sort of a crapshoot anyway.
Oh, it is?
You might as well just toss it in the air and wherever it lands. But the law says it has to go in with the ballots from a particular precinct, so they have to determine where it goes. So we had one from 4-2, went into 2-1. There was one in 6-1 that went into 2-1. There was another one in 6-1 that went into 2-1. It was kind of funny. They were all going to 2-1. I thought, what's going on in Ward 2, Precinct 1? But anyway, so that's where those 3. One of those was an overvote. There was another one in 9-3 was counted for 4-3, right? Now, the drama, as it were, for those who tuned in last week will understand, all right, where we didn't actually go to Cincinnati, but we talked about the Cincinnati method. There was an uncertainty here in that if there was even one additional ballot that was assigned to Leland Chung, and if it was inserted early in his stack of ballots in the order which they're counted, it could cause a little shift and result in a completely different, almost up to 600 ballots different that would have been distributed in the second count to continuing candidates. And it could have really affected these tiny little margins at the last count, after all the process had worked itself through. So there was real drama in the room, and remember there were 4 candidates trying to fill 3 seats. So it was Craig Kelly, Dennis Carlo, Nadine Mazin, and Minka van Buzikum, who was sadly in the 10th position at that stage. So they were all there. The candidates were all there, and I was sitting on the floor. I was sitting at Susanna's feet, and I was sitting on the floor with Hope Kelly, who's Craig Kelly's wife. And we kind of all knew, where's the drama?
The room was that crowded. Everyone was everywhere.
The interesting thing was,
really
it was just the oddity of Cambridge elections is that there are the 4 candidates whose names are sort of up in the air. Like, in this game of musical chairs, 3 will get to sit down and 1 will not, right? So that's, so that's the drama, supposedly. Yet most of the people in the room knew that, an extra ballot for Nadim, oh, wonderful, and another one's for me, oh, that would be great. Yeah, but it was actually a ballot for Leland Chung, which was the one that was going to cause all the drama because of the way it potentially could shift the surplus ballots that were chosen for redistribution. So we went through, as I say, 4. Actually, I actually said it wrong. They were the provisional ballots they did first. So when they went through the provisional ballots, which, were the people who had voted in odd ways, there were none of them for Leland Chung.
Right, so this is how it goes. They have this ballot, and first they vote on whether to accept the ballot or not, just for the reasons why. They vote. They registered in 2-1, but they voted in 4-2. Do we accept this ballot? Then they vote.
And they haven't looked at the ballots
election commissioners,
yet.
right.
Okay.
So then they vote, yes, we'll accept this. Or this person voted in 7-1, but they're not registered, their name's not anywhere, they don't belong anywhere, so do we vote? Forget it, they're not counted. So if they're not counted, they don't even open them, they put them aside. If they vote, yes, we'll accept it, and we'll accept it and put the vote in 2-1 or wherever, then they have this big drama of opening it up, counting it, lifting it up so that everyone can see. It was like the count in the old days.
It
was
really
really
was.
neat, and the room was packed, it was fun.
And on the numbers, there were actually 9 of those provisionals, of which only 4 were considered, several of the other people weren't actually even registered voters. So those were not counted. So of the 9, there were only 4 of them that were actually brought, but as I say, one of them had invalid choices. So only 3 of those counted. And at that point, there hadn't been a ballot for Leland Chung, so there was no uncertainty about the surplus distribution. And I'm sitting next to Craig Kelly's wife, Hope, and she's saying like, oh, we're okay now, we're okay. I said, no, let me tell you, no. Remember, Leland got the most number 1s. There's a good chance that people go, no, it's not going to happen, it's not going to happen. So then they start opening up. The first one, it was not counted, right? Actually, the first 3 were not counted.
What does that mean, not counted?
I think it was that
they weren't valid votes.
They were either not valid votes. Oh, I think at least one of them, they opened up the envelope and they had just returned blanks.
Oh, no, there's some of the overseas. See, this is what happens when you vote too often. We voted in October, we voted in November, we're voting in December. There's another election coming up on December 10th, the election to replace Markey as our congressman. And so the staff at the Election Commission were just collecting all the overseas ballots, absentee ballots coming in. And of course, they had them all thinking they were all for this election. And they were looking at it, will the postmark be right or wrong? And they opened them up, and they're actually absentee ballots for the December 10th election.
Right.
So we have the inside scoop of who's winning for
That's right. Somebody's
the congressional
up by 2.
race.
Yeah. So then they move on, and then there were then 3 that overseas absentee ballots that were counted, and so sure enough, they open up, they announce who's listed physically on the top of the ballot, not who they ranked number 1 for, and then they read off the rankings, and they face number 1, Leland Chung. It was like a gasp in the room. And meanwhile, I have my list of all the precincts in the the order in which they would actually be stacked up for Leland, and it was like right in the middle, and I just turned to Hope and I said, well, that's about 300 ballots just shifted. And you could see this.
That's mean.
Well, I was being very
That's
honest.
mean.
What can I say?
Oh my God, poor
Right?
woman.
No, she's cool. She's very cool. And, and then the next one they open up, and sure enough, same person, same type of ballot, and then it was just a bullet vote, a single number one vote for Leland Chung, right? Which of course was not going to be, if it's a bullet vote for Leland Chung, then it wouldn't even be transferred, so that all it would really do is just move the train down a little more. So it was basically just a shift of one in the stack, but probably in the vicinity of 300 ballots. So
Yeah, if you were one of those candidates at the bottom, you were stressed.
Yeah, and
Now, I want you to know that there were also school committee ballots in there, but
That's
no
right.
one cared.
right, the margins of the school committee election
Yeah.
were so wide that
Yeah.
nothing. I mean, I think I made a bad joke there. I said, amazingly, Patty Nolan
Is
is
still the
defeated.
winner. Oh, yeah.
Right.
So it's not that we don't love our school committee, it's just that there's no drama around it
There was
this
no
year.
drama, absolutely. Now, but again, just to hammer home the point about some of the uncertainty that was associated with the surplus transfer, when we went from preliminary on November 5th to official, Minka actually picked up an additional 16 ballots, and Nadeem Mazen had lost 4 ballots when we took a different draw. So that was a net swing of 20 votes. So, the rest of the election proceeded, but that's really the primary reason why the gap went between them from 15 down to 6. So what happened when we went from, I get the words right here, of unofficial to official this past Friday? Well, in that case, the shift was that at that point, Minka actually dropped 4 from what she had previously, and Nadeem gained 6.
Wow.
So that was a 10-vote swing, and again, nobody was particularly surprised when at the end of the 16th count, the gap between those two had now opened up to, I think, 13 or 14. And now, actually, so much so that Nadeem had actually surpassed Dennis Carlone, so that at the end of the 16th count, it was actually Carlone was in the 9th slot with Minka in the 10th. So now the gap was between Carlone and Minka, and I think it was a 13-vote gap, I believe, at the end.
Wow.
That's where it stands today. Now, there have been recounts, so, well, we should make it really clear. My understanding of talking to Minka yesterday is that, there'd been rumor and then some about whether she would file for recount. My understanding, she has filed for recount. And my point has always been, for an election this close, it should probably be automatic anyway.
Yeah.
But, so that's apparently going to happen. She had until Wednesday at 5 to submit the paperwork.
So she had till tomorrow?
She had it till
But she'll do
tomorrow,
today.
but she actually, she
Good.
submitted the paperwork yesterday.
Good.
I think my understanding was 150, you need 50 signatures, she turned in 150 signatures on the petition, so it's going to happen. There is some issue about where it's going to happen. I think back in 2001, it was up in the old,
The police station.
above the police station where the old election commission office was. They cleared it out for that purpose.
'Cause you need a lot of room.
You need room. 4 years ago, when it was Patty Nolan had bested Joe Grassi by 18 votes, and Joe asked for a recount, they did it up on Huron Avenue at the Sheila Russell, I should say the Russell Youth Center,
Oh, they did?
up on Huron Avenue. But my understanding, talking to the election commission staff, is that they can't really use the senior center, right, which is one logical place to do it, because the recount's going to take days, and they use that room for senior activities.
Yeah.
And
That's almost too small.
right, and I think that the one up on Huron Avenue, the big gymnasium in there, apparently that one too is not available. So the last I heard is there's a possibility it may happen in the Armory building up on Concord Avenue. But that's, I think I might have heard that from Minka, but she didn't know. It was just that was one of the ideas that had been floated. But I'm sure the election commission staff are working hard right now to try and line up the space to.
Do they have a deadline for when it has to start?
Well, yeah, I think as soon as the petition is filed, the election commission now is under the gun to get the recount done within 10 days.
Get it finished within 10 days?
Finished within 10 days.
So they have to start tomorrow.
Well, they might creatively stop the clock, at midnight and says, well, it's, there's a little poetic license, I suppose, people could actually do if need be here. But there are better procedures for conducting recounts now. I think in 2001, an error was made in that people, whoever was in charge decided to originally sort the ballots by number one choices and then do the matching of the electronic data with the physical ballot. And that actually made it take tremendously longer. In 2009, with the school committee race, they sorted, I believe, by ballot style. There's this ballot rotation where every candidate is supposed to appear physically at the top of approximately equal number of ballots. So if you just sort them by style, then it's very easy to match the ballot record, which actually indicates the style, to that. It's basically taking the whole problem in every precinct and dividing it in, I think there were 9 candidates that year, dividing it into 9 smaller problems. This one, there are 25 candidates, so they can actually divide a precinct. Even if a precinct had 200, let's say 1,000 people had voted, they could divide it by 25 and they'd have 40 smaller problems to do the matching. And they could probably do it with some efficiency. You just have to have enough people to do it working simultaneously to do it.
Because they don't just put them all back in the computer and have the computer run it again, right?
Well, now there's a really good question. And there's a checkoff box on the, which I don't think Minka had to necessarily commit to one way or the other right at the start, but candidate can ask for a hand recount, a manual recount, or a machine recount. Now, what does that mean? A hand recount or a manual recount would mean not only do you do all the ballot matchings and sort of make sure all the ballots are correctly interpreted, which is what the recount's primarily about, but then after you've done that, you then actually proceed to go through very old-fashioned Cambridge style of assigning them by number ones and doing the surplus transfers and going through all the counts, and it's very time consuming.
Doesn't it have to be in order, though?
Well, you have to basically, the law says you have to try and recreate the original election as much as humanly possible, but if you discover another ballot that belonged in there, you have to put it in where it belongs, and that can change everything. So sure, you have to formally make it, try to make it match, but it's not going to match. Just can't physically do that. So, so then you could do this by hand, or I think the rule would be, as long as all the parties, the affected parties would agree to it, you could actually just get all the ballots, make sure they're recorded correctly, create ballot data files, just like we did on election day and the day after by passing them through scanners or whatever, get an accurate electronic record of all the ballots, and then just hit the button and then do all the transfers by machine. In my opinion, for all those who are listening, I'm going to make my appeal here. That's the best way to do it, because first off, it's going to be more accurate than if it's done by human beings in that case, as long as we know that the ballots were properly interpreted in the first place. That's the main thing. But once that's done, really the right way to do it would be a machine count, and then see what happens when it's done.
I don't know. I think if you were that 10th candidate, you might think of it differently.
People might think they have more control over it, but the only thing you really have control over is the original interpretation of the ballots. And let's be clear where some of these issues can arise with interpretation of ballots. We even saw one on last Friday where there was a voter, voted for some candidates, and you see the little bubbles, 1, 2, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2. You're supposed to fill in an oval, and the voter had actually not filled in the oval next to their favorite candidate. They had just circled the number. And if you just circle the number, the machine
can't read it.
Well, the machine might read it, but my understanding is that you have to fill in somewhere in the vicinity of about 30% of the oval for the sensitivity of the machine to pick it up. So if a voter is, really kind of, a little silly and they just go dot, I love my Craig, boom, like that, then might not get the vote, unless you fill it in. There are other potential problems if somebody could go, I love my candidate, and it might be viewed as a stray mark, or it might go into the other bubble. So there are some things that can happen from improperly marked ballots or
And that's
inadequately.
how you take the SAT too.
You figure all these people are taking the SATs, right? So, but anyway, these are the things that you only discover when you're actually doing a manual, not a manual recount, but just a recount where you actually, human beings have to actually look at the ballots and make triply sure everything's correct. If the margins of victory are relatively wide, it doesn't matter. If you move 10 ballots here, where whatever, it's not going to make that much of a difference. But there have been elections when there were recounts. I forget was going to mark it down, but I forgot. I think it was in 19, I think it was I think it was with a school committee one with David Marr and Jimmy Rafferty, where I think David had lost by 34 votes. And then there was a recount, and after the recount, he still lost, but he lost by 11 votes. So
Wow.
that was a 23 vote swing. So, you know, you can see from the record that you can have a swing of 23 ballots can move.
Wow.
And, you know, when you're talking about margins of victory that had been 6, but it grew to 13, and you've seen vote swings where it can be as much as 20 or more, you can kind of understand how, in fact, nothing's, as Yogi Berra once said, it really ain't over till it's over, right?
So this means we might be talking about this again next week.
Yeah, I mean, nobody has actually
Sorry
settled
about
on when things are happening, but you know, I'm sure we'll learn in the next few days exactly what's being planned. And
I hope it's over by next week.
well, I think a lot of people are hoping so, because there's no question about will we go past Thanksgiving,
Oh,
right?
boy.
And you know, the 10-day maximum that the Election Commission is, at least in theory, supposed to complete the recount by, that starts to run into a bit of a problem when you're sort of pushing up against Thanksgiving, because you certainly don't want to like ask everybody to give up their Thanksgiving holidays to do a damn recount, right? But you know,
And it
it's-
would be awkward to tell your families and friends, I gotta go. I gotta go see the recount.
yeah, that's right. I'm sorry.
See ya.
Yeah, we can't go to the Everett Cambridge traditional
You gotta go to the
football
armory.
game. We got to go up to the Armory or wherever it turns out to be. They can do it in my house if they want, right?
That would make it easier to leave your Thanksgiving
You'd be
table.
right around the corner, absolutely. So, anyway, we ought to wrap up if I'm reading that clock correctly.
Thanks, all of you who called. We really appreciate the calls. And we have another half hour, so you still have a chance.
So we'll see you in a few seconds. So for now, my name is Robert, and this is Cambridge Inside.
Out. Bye.